Ahoy folks, Triss here, and welcome to part 2 of our Xenoblade Chronicles 3 spoilers discussion. In this half, we primarily focus on the ending of the game, timeline theories, and so much more. So, of course, there's spoilers ahead. But if you haven't watched part 1, make sure to check that out first. With that out of the way, let's get right back to this discussion between myself and Nantandrix of Source Gaming. But the ending, the final boss, the presentation to it all. I know we're already almost an hour into this discussion, but we're getting to this point now. It took me a little while to adjust to it, because it was one of those I really needed to sit back and think on it all in retrospect. Because initially... Okay, first off, the final boss, Z as a villain, I don't really like. He's not as... It doesn't stand out as a villain to me as much as... the previous Xenoblade Chronicles games, but I like the idea of all of this happened because Origin couldn't calculate what would happen when the worlds fused. So it just stopped time and created entities that feared the future to keep it this way. I like the idea behind it. I just wish that Z had more character to it.
I feel cheated that Z wasn't actually a Zanza in some way. Like, that was one of the things, when I was like, oh, J is Yorin, N is Noah, well, Z is very clearly Zanza, right? Like, that's the thing that makes the most sense. But no, Z, and I guess X and Y, are just the Origin computer manifesting forms using the souls of everybody trapped in Origin. Like, I think it's an interesting idea. Z is this concept that... people are so terrified of the future and he wants to protect them, that the solution is just to not have a future.
No, I really like the idea and the motivation behind it. I just wish there was more to specifically the character.
Because
I think it would have built it up as a villain more, and how everything was leading up to it. But before I talk about the fight itself and the actual ending, when you rescue Melia in Origin, and she gives Riku that look, like they know each other. And we get absolutely no understanding of that. It never comes back up again in any of her quests or any post-game stuff. The most I can imagine is... yes, they forgot to tell us, or reveal to us, that she's the reason he had Lucky 7 to give to Noah at the right time, I guess. And he knew some of these things all along, maybe? I don't know, they forgot to tell us that.
I'm assuming this will have something to do with the DLC or something.
Oh, I hope.
Like, I've seen some theories around that Riku's the Noppon Archsage of this game, because we never saw one, and there's one in every game. And that would work. There's also, like... the fact that technically N also has his own version of Lucky 7.
That's true. He
does. His dark version of it. So, Riku? Did Riku know that? Did Riku know? Because Riku claims that it was his master who gave him Lucky 7, but we never obviously find out who his master is. So, is it? Because you don't know. Noppon seem to live for a ridiculous amount of times. This is one of the things that was bothering me, because Origin. Nia heavily implies that Tora had something to do with it, right?
Yeah, that Tora
she
built
says,
or something.
Yeah, she was like, a famous Noppon mechanic.
A certain Noppon,
yeah. So that would be the implication, and given that the actually no, that's a separate thing. Sorry, I was going to bring up Poppy, who obviously makes a cameo at the end and is revealed to be inside Nia's supercomputer, but that's actually not got anything to do with Origin. But like, the game also implies that it's been like 800 years minimum since Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 to this game.
That. Like, or at least in Ionios it's been that long, because the lifespan of the High Entia is only like 400 years.
Well,
but
I mean,
being in Ionios, I guess, changes things, because it's now they're stuck. They're not gonna die of old age, the normal, or maybe maybe they won't, because they're immortals and it kept them that way. But
this is one of those things that it feels like I wish the game would focus on, because the game doesn't even attempt to highlight the fact that all of these characters are technically different races.
Yeah,
like they always call themselves humans, but other than one cutscene where early on where Lance points out Senna's core crystal and she points out the metal plating he has for skin, it's then never addressed again, which is I find really weird. But like, enough time had to have passed, because we see this isn't just an Ionius thing. Even before the worlds fused, Union lands were aging like normal people do. Yep. Like they were all children at the same time. So this could only really have happened over hundreds and hundreds of years of, I guess, crossbreeding between like species and stuff like that. Which means it's like, must have been a while. And Nia's own thing is that, like, she doesn't remember any of the events of 2. She only vaguely has memories of stuff. Like, she remembers that she was saved by a Van Damme, but she doesn't really remember the context around it. And stuff like that. Melia does remember a lot more. But it must have been a long time since for any of this to make sense. But then, like you said, Hyentia are only meant to live until they're about 400, and Melia looks like she's not that... Like, she looks older in this game for sure.
Yeah. She's definitely not a kid anymore. But she
she's
looks
also not
like...
an old lady.
No, she's not. Like, I think... I you know... Xenoblade Chronicles big-time fans can correct me in the comments on this one, but, like, I'm pretty sure her father, who looks really old in Xenoblade 1, not, like, terribly old, but maybe the equivalent of, like, a 50 or 60-year-old human, he was, like, 400, or nearing 400. The lifespan is somewhere between 300 to 400 years. Melia looks like maybe a woman in her 30s now, as opposed to maybe a 19-year-old girl. Yeah,
but if you follow, like, the way the story works, she should have been much older than that. And clearly the idea of how eternity works is like Melia has been at least trapped there for a 1,000 years inside Origin minimum, but she doesn't look like she's aged. But other characters age, clearly. The city has had multiple generations to go, so everyone else is aging, so why is she not aging? The game just sort of covers this up in the relationship chart, the affinity chart, by just saying age, who knows, for like all of these types of characters. And so it just makes me think, like, how long are Nopon meant to live for? When I looked it up, they apparently live for about 240 years, and that's the oldest Nopon there. So, like, do they live for longer? Was Tora like an old man? If Tora was able to build Origin, what happened to him after that? Because it's sort of implied that only Nia and Poppy are the only ones left from Xenoblade 2. So, did he build Origin and die immediately?
What I believe, and this is more of my own theory to it, and this will tie into the ending too, is why I think it's so fitting to bring up here. I believe everything that happened with the worlds fusing wasn't too long after, because we had hints of that happening with Future Connected.
Don't get me
Future
started,
Connected in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. It's I know, but like you have the hint of some sort of connection between the two. I doubt that then took like 500 plus years to manifest into what it did. But I think what could have happened is the whole thing with Origin, they built it on both sides, and then the worlds fused, and seeing the threat of the people that saved these worlds originally, while Origin had these people in it, it did not enable them to go through the cycle of rebirth part of it. Because it felt they would end the Endless Now. So that's why you have people that seem like descendants to Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 characters, but not them directly. Because Nia and the ending looks at the picture of, as memes go, the Giga Chad Rex.
CEO of Sex Rex.
Like, she looks at the picture, she's like, oh, I'll see you all soon. And Melia thanks everybody with the Monado, or looking at the Monado. And it doesn't look particularly old, the Monado.
No.
So it makes me wonder if, like, by the worlds going back to when the fusion happened, but preventing the fusion, it actually makes me wonder if they would all still be alive, or at least, older, somewhere at that point.
The minimum I've seen people say this happened is at least 100 years, because I did see one thing, I haven't actually confirmed it, but supposedly in the opening cutscene it's meant to be the Melia, like what they're celebrating with the fireworks that young Noah and Co are going to go see, is supposed to be for like Melia's 100 years, I guess, like,
or some sort of anniversary of her coronation.
Yeah, some anniversary of her coronation, which would put her about 189, which might be a bit more reasonable around her looking about 30-ish.
Yeah.
So that would probably make more sense. At that point, Shulk, Ryan, the main characters, other than Ricky, I guess, would probably all still not be around anymore. But then you'd assume in the Xenoblade 2 line that the other Blades would at least be around. I don't know, it's hard because Blades as well, moving on to that side, are clearly handled very differently. Like, Nia is still obviously a Blade, and she does stuff with her core crystals.
Yeah.
But characters like Senna and Mio are clearly descendant from Blades, but aren't actually Blades. They age like normal. And they're not connected to any kind of driver. They just have crystals because I guess it's biological now.
Yeah, whatever new world they made at the end of Xenoblade 2 is interesting.
But then it's just like, well, what happened to, like... I guess when Zeke, Morag, and Rex all passed away, then I guess Brigid, Pandoria, and Pyra and Mithra all just did as well. Like, they just turned back into core crystals, and Nia just has them in like a shelf somewhere. I don't know, because like
has them on display.
Yeah, like Senna clearly looks like she's descendant from Brigid from the hair.
Yeah,
like I think that's clearly the reference there, which would imply that Brigid must have, I guess, have descendants as well. So, and also what happened to Dromark? Nia's still around, so he must be still around, but he's clearly not around because he doesn't show up. Only Poppy shows up.
Which is interesting too. It also confirms that all of Poppy's evolutions, all her new models, are not canon. So canonically, Rex did not play that game for like 300 hours.
No.
Anyway, no, but I think the idea that there's clearly some level of inconsistencies here. Like, we didn't even address the fact that Tyrea should still be alive with Melia. But she just wasn't around. Melia even mentions her. Oh, there was an assassin in my family once.
Yeah, it gets brought up in a thing.
Okay,
but...
where did she go? She seemed like she was going to be your right hand at the coronation, and where is she now? She shouldn't be dead. Well, in terms of old age, she shouldn't be dead.
Yeah, but, I guess, unless something tragic happened.
Yeah, like
I mean, this is one of those things as well. It's like that. Now that I'm just thinking about it, why? If everyone else from both universes got turned into souls and put inside Origins, they could survive. Why did Melia and Nia not? Like, why are they the only two that are, like, just still their physical selves and stuff like this? Like, Poppy can sort of be explained away as being a robot and not actually a blade or anything, so potentially could survive something like that. I guess she technically doesn't have a soul in the same purpose. But, like, Nia and Melia, surely they should have become souls as well, or did they need to stay behind because they needed someone to operate it from both sides? Is that why they're the only two there? In which case, are all the other characters, like their souls somehow ended up being as part of the cycle, I guess? It's just one of those weird things that's not really explained. And these questions start coming up. Like, another question I sort of had is, everyone goes through this cycle, but does this mean everyone is between the ages of, like, 10 and 20 in this game? Unless they're from the city? Because there are some characters that definitely don't look like they're between between the ages of 10 and 20. And when you really stop to think about it, because Mio's death is coming up, and that's a big point, part of hers, but none of the other 10th termers have this thing, and none of them obviously die. That means Mio must be older than basically every other character in this game. Like, Ethel and Kamaravi might be the only two exceptions, and that's because they die before her.
Yeah.
So you can say that they're older. So it's stuff like Teach, who runs Colony Gamma,
is younger than her.
Their teacher is younger than Mio.
Yeah. It's weird how that plays out. Like, I suspect it's not exactly 10 and 20. Like, I suspect like people will come out and they'll be somewhere starting off between 10 and 15 or so, and then 10 years from there, just because some characters definitely look way older than they should be. But
it got me thinking: do these characters they go through the cycle at whatever age they were when the universes collided?
That's what I think.
Noah and Co are clearly the same. Whatever are clearly like 10 years old or whatever when that happens, and then they're born as 10 years old. Then that opens a whole other can of worms, because it's kind of like, what about people who are younger than 10 years old when this happened?
Origin just stored their souls. And
the Origin's just like, there's no point in putting them out there. They'll die before they can do anything.
And anyone too young or anyone too old, Origin was just like, they would disrupt the balance and just kind of, nope, you're staying in here.
And because everyone's on a cycle, and clearly this cycle, it's hard to know whether or not this cycle, like, when do they get reborn? Do they have to wait another 10 years and then be reborn? That doesn't seem to be the case, because in Lanz's side story, those other characters who they used to know as kids but then apparently died when they got moved, like Kite's old colleagues, they've been revived, and Lanz obviously meets them and recognizes them. But like, how did they avoid this before? Did they just try and send, this guy died in Colony 9, let's send him to a colony that's like the furthest away when he gets reborn?
Yeah, so they probably moved them and also waited sometimes, so you don't run into the same people again, because otherwise everyone would know about the whole cycle of it all. So it's definitely interesting to see. I don't want to call them the holes of the world, because it's not quite plot holes. There's ways they could explain it. It's just the things they chose not to explain to us further. And I think it's really fascinating. I mean, like, you even look at Ethel's, like, basically the day she died, her body was already there as a kid again in the castle.
Yeah.
So it clearly happens very quickly in terms of Origin spitting the souls back out. But I think what's most tragic about the ending is everyone in the city.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, they when it, like, the whole point of this game is to save life and to go for, to build a new future that isn't determined by this, that isn't part of this whole cycle of life and death that everyone is going through on a 10-year basis. It's to have a safe world with the future. But you learn basically when you're at Origin, you don't really learn it much sooner than that saving this world means splitting them apart again, erasing this world, because the annihilation events that keep happening throughout, the history of the game, they don't really happen during the game that much. You learn those are essentially like reality bleeding through. The fact that these worlds can't exist together at the same time. They will destroy each other. The annihilation events are small pockets of it happening. And we learn that further from, like, characters interlinking too long, they're fused too long, well, they can't, and it causes the annihilation events to happen further. So we know they can't stay fused, and it doesn't really hit until the final boss that by fighting for this future, you're not giving a future to this world, you're giving a future to the original worlds.
Yeah.
And that's like the biggest part of the theme of this game of, it doesn't matter if you don't know what's going to happen in the future. It's having a future is what matters. And that's tragic, because the people of the city with newborn children and such don't get that.
Yeah, they just cease to exist after this point. I mean, they try to imply that these people will be born again, because clearly they're all people who did exist at, like, obviously not the current generation, but their ancestors all did exist at one point in either Kevis or Agnes. Yeah. And so, like, even if it will take hundreds, thousands of years, these guys, everyone in the city will eventually get their chance to be reborn again in a new world where they hopefully won't have to fight. But it is somewhat pretty tragic that all of these characters like Grey and Monica and Gondor just cease to exist after all this happens. Yeah. But I also kind of like that there's an element of tragedy, because for me the big theme of this game is to keep moving forward, don't live life without regrets. Yeah. You never know what will happen, even if it's something bad. You just got to pick yourself up and keep walking forward. You effectively only fail when you stop in place. And that's what N did. N chose to live in the infinite now, as they call it, or the whatever.
The endless now, yeah.
The endless now. and so he refused to move forward, and that's shown as a failure. But part of moving forward is living with regret, or a decision having a bad consequence, and you just having to keep thinking positive and looking forward. So some element of tragedy, like them having to make this decision but it wipes out an entire city of people, is pretty tragic. But you do also kind of just need to keep going forward, I guess. I don't know. It's I don't. As I say this, it sounds starting to sound like a bit of a dangerous message. But from a narrative point of view, I think it's a bit of tragedy that's done quite well to deliver the message. And knowing that eventually one day all the people in the city should be reborn is at least something.
Yeah, eventually their souls will come about in some way, Gondor jokes, maybe she'll be reborn with a better name.
Yeah.
And obviously the exact circumstances may be different, like, someone from the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 may not exactly be able to easily get together and have kids.
But I had that thought as well.
But I do love the fact, though, that the very end of the game, we see that Noah, Mio, and the party are committed to, they will see each other again someday.
Yeah.
And it's Noah's little message as they look out at the sunset. It's really nice, honestly. I really like their outlook on it. And then after the long credits, you get the reveal that it put the worlds back to the exact instant of the fusion. And then it begs the question, does anyone even remember? Does Uni still have that book, the recipe? That's
I know. That's there's a lot of questions. It logically makes sense that that's where things would restart.
Yes.
Because 1,000 years technically haven't passed. Yep. Technically no time has passed since the worlds collided. That's the whole point. But yeah, it does sort of mean that book and all of that. Do they even remember any of the characters? Like, Noah obviously hears the flute melody at the end, and it's left ambiguous,
which is weird.
I think it just zooms out. I think it's just implied that he
as it zooms out. As it zooms out, they have the birds fly by, and as the birds fly by and cover him, he actually just disappears.
Oh, okay.
When the birds are gone, he's not there anymore, but all the other people around him that he was walking with are still there, which is weird. So it gives this implication that maybe there is still some sort of connection, or maybe I don't know. It's weird. That shouldn't happen right away. But
I feel like it's just
I don't expect that to get answered.
Yeah, I don't think it will get answered. I think it's just being purposely vague. Yeah. The flute could be Mio's, it could be Chris, because Chris also exists in their worlds, and he plays that song, so it could be him. I think it's just left to the player's imagination, I guess, the headcanon of what you want to happen at the end of this.
Something along those lines, yeah. I mean, that's really the best way to interpret it, because other than maybe Melia and Nia remembering because they were building Origin in the first place, they were communicating in the first place, they probably know at least that their worlds are safe.
Them probably, being that they weren't spirited away into Origin and seemingly still had their physical bodies, and so were able to be independent of Origin itself. Yeah. Would sort of imply that they will at least remember everything that happens, because they're not being reset exactly to the same point of where they were.
It's it's interesting how much it doesn't answer, but also how much it is open, because that's very different from what the past two Xenoblade games did for their endings. But I like it, honestly. I really like that ending, because it's very hopeful towards the future.
Even with all of my sort of nitpickiness and poking holes in the plot of this, I think its attempt at doing the 10-year thing and all of its themes and the story it's trying to tell and the message at the end of it sort of overwrites all of my complaints about it, because stuff like this, when you're trying to be tell an interesting story in this way, is always going to have but what if this happens, or stuff like this. You can always point holes in it, and I think the story here and the narrative is told well enough that I'm willing to overlook some of these, like, very blatant problems that the world building and stuff brings into it when you stop to think about it for more than a few minutes.
Yeah. I really wonder if this game had, like, even just, like, another year behind it. I wonder if a lot of those, like, late game issues, like chapter, like, 6 onwards, I wonder if a lot of those would have been addressed and maybe paced a little bit better.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to know without knowing what their motivation is.
Of course.
Because I think if you don't do any of the side quests and you just beeline the story, the pacing is probably pretty consistent throughout it all. It's only because I think you spend most of your time doing side quests between chapters 3 and 5.
Yeah.
Like, that's when the bulk of them arrive. By the point of reaching chapter 6, you'll most likely have every single hero other than the 3 that are introduced in that chapter.
Yep.
And then once you hit chapter 6, there really aren't many new quests. Like I complained about at the start, Kamaravi and Miyabi have 0 quests other than their Ascension ones. Seguri does have a whole colony to herself, but that's it. Tion's quest, I don't remember if it comes in chapter 6 or if it comes in chapter 5, but the Lost Colony is like this entire area that has nothing in it.
Yeah.
There's not a single quest in that area other than Tion's quest.
Which kind of makes sense when you think about it, because they want to be, the whole point is keeping them secret and independent. And I kind of like that they don't want your outside help, so I kind of like that added touch.
I do think that there is cut content in this game.
Yeah.
I've been doing my little investigating into, like, the files of this game and all this, and it seems like Nimue was going to be a hero at one point.
I can understand that.
Cut. Which would have, if she was a hero, it would have given, like, all of the Lost Colony actually missions and stuff to do.
Yep, which suddenly would have added a lot more.
Yeah. And, like, this would have all presumably come more towards the end of the game. So there's definitely, I think, more time to develop would have probably added more stuff into it and maybe fixed some of these pacing issues. But I think it really just comes down to how much was pushed into the side quests for some reason in this title. I don't know if it's because they planned on making the heroes always optional other than the select few. I mean, it seems like the amount of heroes, the heroes that were going to be optional and the heroes that weren't going, the heroes that were optional and the ones that are story required seemingly changed throughout development.
Yeah.
Like, again, I was looking through some things and it looks like Monica and Kamaravi were intended to always, like, be characters you would definitely get, which isn't the case. They're both optional. Whereas, like, Valdi and Gondor seem to be optional characters at one point that then just got booted up to being required characters. I guess Valdi because he's sort of the first hero you get, even though Ethel comes just before him, but then you lose Ethel immediately. So they must have thought we need to introduce another hero quick.
Yeah, and getting your first healer, getting another healer early on to help introduce the mechanic, I think works nicely. Like,
I definitely think there's some twist around, but it's hard to know without knowing what their motivation was to sideline so much of the side stories, I guess,
now
into being optional.
Now, speaking of those, though, there's still the DLC heroes to come, and we have no, and they're gonna have quests, and maybe, hopefully, like actual side quests beyond just the hero quest. Like, I hope it doesn't become a case of, oh, here's your hero, there's the hero quest, and then their ascension quest. Like, I hope we get, like, side quests tied to them to flesh out these characters a little bit.
Yeah,
but where are they gonna go?
Well, there's the challenge room as well, which is kind of the same one that Xenoblade 2 had, it looks like. And so potentially the first hero is going to be tied into that, and the quest might have something to do with the challenge room. But the second hero that you get, I mean, I think it might be Poppy, and we'll tie it into the Cloud Keep because we know Poppy is there. Just because I sort of understand not wanting to reveal that early on, because it would spoil that factor, but we'll probably won't know what's going to be in DLC Pack 2 until this, I mean, I guess that would be DLC Pack 3 because we've had DLC Pack 1 already.
Yep.
DLC Pack 2 doesn't come out till the end of this year, and by that point, we're already good. Most people will have had the chance to have played and beaten the whole game.
Right.
So revealing in a Nintendo Direct that Poppy is going to be a new hero or something and then they just tied to the Cloud Keep or whatever, and have missions there post game
I can see that.
stuff. Like, I think that's potentially an option that they'll go for.
Yeah, I can.
But you're right. Like, I just don't know where they would add a new colony in to to stuff. At least for this, I think the final DLC, the Torna equivalent, will be slightly different, and I think we'll have new colonies there. Because I feel like it's going to be a prequel type thing, like Torna is.
Yeah.
And there are some interesting points that get pointed out in side missions, like I did one of the Colony Mew side quests where Triton shows up and sort of establishes a connection, and he brings up the fact that a long time ago, Colony Mew is a fairly new colony. The island that they're on used to just be a place where people would go and meet and stuff, and it makes me think that, well, if that's changed, I wonder what other colonies used to be there. Colony 4 obviously didn't always used to be in the middle of the desert. It gets there as part of this game. So, and we know colonies like Colony 15 gets destroyed. So will that be a colony that you can go visit in the DLC?
That would be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you got like V's colony, and V clearly had a colony with people in it because he was there not only for Chris's backstory, but he's also there for Ashura's backstory. And yet, in the present day, his colony is just full of robots and nothing else.
Yeah, who knows? It's definitely there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I think a prequel is probably the best way to go about that.
Yeah,
but
Consolee as well. Who is he? Well,
that's true,
I guess. Because Consolee is the only one we don't see in this game, so I can only assume Consolee must be the main villain of the DLC who dies in it, because it's the only reason. Obviously, they can replace consoles at any time, but they've been very clear to not have any overlapping letters.
Yeah.
And Consolee just isn't in this game.
Interesting.
for some reason.
I mean, who knows anymore, man? I mean, I feel like they can go through a whole different alphabet of consoles if they really wanted to. Like,
start going through the Greek alphabet.
Yeah, right. Like, I think part of the fun with the DLC that we're going to get, though, is it's just that it's going to add more to this game, and hopefully that DLC story will be something that enhances this experience rather than being something that largely stands. Like, I hope this will be more like future connected in terms of its relation to the main story, rather than like Torna and its relation to the main story too. Personally, at least.
Yeah, I think it'll have a bit of both. I feel like you can't go forward with the world split apart, so you have to go backwards.
I don't see how they go forward with it.
And there's a handful of things in this game that just aren't explained that I feel really should be. The Fog, again, the Fog King is a weak villain in Future Connected, but you excuse it because you assume it's going to come back in this game, and it just kind of doesn't. Like, the Black Fog is brought up so much, and so are all of the I forgot what they were called now. You know, where the two worlds collide and stuff.
The Annihilation events?
Yeah, the Annihilation events. But you don't know what Annihilation events actually happen during this game. And the Black Fog is just used as the fuel, I guess, for the Annihilation events. But it's never touched upon again after Keva's Castle.
Yep.
It's just a forgotten piece of the story, and it feels like it should be more. So I feel like that's got to come into play. And then you've got stuff like N and M's son that Noah just leaves in the woods to fend for himself, I guess. Where they make it like a big point of like hiding his name and stuff like this. And then you assume it would come up, and then the second they were like, oh, this happened 1,000 years ago, I was just like, oh, okay, so I guess that child
he's
is
gone.
Dead now then. So, okay. I guess, did we not get the name because it just wasn't important, or is this DLC fodder? Like, is their son going to be like the main character of the DLC? Like, how is this going to work? And then again, all the stuff with Riku as well, because like, there's clearly something going on with Riku. It gets brought up multiple times that he clearly knows more than what is going on, and without him, none of that they wouldn't be able to succeed. So that's got to be something.
There's got to be something with Riku. There's got to be something with at least Riku. It would be weird if not. But I guess it also begs the question, and not to get too heavily into DLC stuff, because that could be a whole separate discussion. But like, I think having something as a prequel, it worked for Torna, and with this, you have to be very careful with it because they fail.
Mm-hmm.
They can't go as far as freeing everyone from Origin.
Yeah.
And if it takes place in this world of Ionios before, it can only go so far. It can't be this grandiose thing that saves their world, because we know from base game Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it didn't.
Yeah. I've got my own theories around that, but that's why I'm doing a video on it.
Yeah.
Research. So you can go watch that whenever it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I guess with Torna, we also knew they would fail at the end of it.
That's true.
I think they still did a pretty good job there, even though Torna has like the most tragic ending of any of these games. But I feel like you can't move forward, so you have to go backwards with the DLC for this one. Mm-hmm. Because the only thing I could think of DLC would be showing the characters again grown up now, and then the worlds colliding somehow again. Like you'd have to skip forward 8 years so that Noah, Uni, and Lands are all like 18 again.
Yep.
And then they'd all have to, for whatever reason, have chosen to get into combat somehow, even though they don't have to anymore because they're not in the military. And then some kind of event will have had to have happened to bring them back to, I guess, the others, yeah. It'd be given a happy ending, which would be fair, but you just have to be careful about how you do that as well. Because you wouldn't be able to use the same map either.
Nope.
You wouldn't be able to use Aeonius, so how do you do it?
It's risky.
At least you'd get like adult Joran, I suppose, as a party member. You wouldn't be able to have Ouroboros as well unless they somehow reintroduce that. But then you're sort of retreading old ground because you're having the party of 3 re-meet each other.
Yeah,
and stuff.
It's a slippery slope. If it's somewhere from the future of 3, it's a slippery slope at that point, and it runs the risk of it may not be worth doing. There's more interesting stories you can tell from before. Keeping the ending of 3 as it is leaves it open to players' interpretations what happens next.
Yeah, and I think that's the intention. And probably the better outcome.
Yeah. Well, we've been going for about an hour and a half at this point.
Yeah.
So it might be slightly less depending on editing, but do you have any final thoughts that you want to bring up about Xenoblade Chronicles 3? I mean, we didn't even touch upon like the gameplay being incredibly solid, but I think so much of this spoiler discussion is about the story and world.
Yeah, there's just so much to say about the story in this, and so much to sort of debate about and think about for that. Trying to fit gameplay and presentation into there is quite something.
Exactly.
My brief thoughts on that is that the gameplay is great, probably the best the series has done.
Yep.
Presentation is interesting. It's better and also worse in weird ways. I explained it in my review more clearly. I like it. I know where I want them to improve for Xenoblade 4. I guess I'll leave it like that.
That's a great way to put it, and I definitely agree. Like, I do love this game. Like, I really do. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely certain shortcomings that prevent it from being like my favorite game of all time, or favorite Xenoblade Chronicles game of all time, because there are elements of it that I think the other games did better. Yeah. And that's okay. I think having shortcomings here means we can easily identify where they can improve for the next game eventually. Mm-hmm. And this is for me, as someone who really likes Xenoblade Chronicles 1, doesn't like 2 that much, and was worried this game was going to be more like 2, and that's more just it's just not my thing. I loved what I got out of this, and being able to talk about these spoilers finally is so good.
Just get it all out there.
Yeah, like,
one thing
finally.
I realized, only because when I did my review I used some scenes from 2 and 1 as well to get some points across, so I went back and looked at 2, and I didn't realize how much I appreciated lip syncing. Like, my god, 2's lip syncing is just, it doesn't exist. It's like Sonic Adventure levels of being terrible. And like, this game is so much better just by having the characters lip sync to their voice actors now.
It's a very nice touch. It's a very nice touch of the presentation, yeah.
But I guess for a last mention on the story axis is that this game is, I think, where it excels is that it's like a character-driven game. Yeah. I think that's the best part of it, both with the heroes and the protags. Like, I love Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and I love all the characters in there, but, like, Sharla and Ryan get shafted pretty badly.
Oh, yeah.
Only being relevant for Sharla's little quest line that happens on the Machina, and then doing nothing after the whole Zanza stuff. Yeah. Ricky has his moments and is fun, but also doesn't really add a massive amount to the actual plot.
Ricky also feels like he's supposed to be there for some comic relief, but yeah.
Yeah. And then 2 also has, like... People obviously really like the cast of 2, and I do think that they are fun characters.
Yeah.
But I think most of the Blades are super... Obviously not the main cast of Blades, but all the side cast of Blades are basically all really forgettable. There's just I don't really care about any of them other than Rock, who I would consider like a main character, I suppose. But 3 manages to have both its main 6 all be super likable. Senna gets less development than the others do, but I
she's
still
like
likable.
Her. Yeah.
Yeah. And all of the heroes, I can't think of a single hero that I don't like. Like, I think Teach and Izzard might be the most bland, but I think especially in Izzard's case that partly comes down to his design just also being pretty bland for me.
Like, I can see that, yeah. I can understand that.
Yeah, like, other than like every other hero, I mean, and I like both of them as well. I just prefer all the other heroes to them. That's my thing. That it's the weakest hero, but he's still a good character. And his ascension quest of going on a search for a hot spring is one of the funnier ones that happens. So, like, they did a really good job of pushing the characters in this game.
Yep.
And making you like them all, and all of the stories and all of the side quests. Like, removing the side quests from just ignoring the 3-month thing with Mio, and just imagining the side quests as, like, one-off episodes in an anime. And they were all, like, enjoyable little mini stories where each of these heroes have their own issues that they need to get over and their own relationships with other colonies. And it'd just be nicer if there was a way that was properly integrated into the main story, but it works well. And I think that's where Xenoblade Chronicles 3's plot really excels at over all of the others. Its characters are better. Its characters are just more consistent, more enjoyable, and used better than the characters in previous games.
Yeah, across the board, the majority of characters, including main characters, are much more likable and have a more balanced presence than in past games.
Yeah, even the super minor characters in this game, like Kite or Sigrun, I don't know if it's because it's more like recent, but like I remember them more than characters of equal standing in 1 and especially 2. I mean, I don't remember any character that falls in that category.
I mean, listen, people only remember Juju because of the memes. In Xenoblade 1. I can guarantee nobody remembers every detail of their Colony 6 restoration.
Yeah. I remember the old man. I don't remember his name, but I remember what he looks like. And Melia had a brother. I just don't remember his name either. Or anything he did other than sacrifice himself. But yeah.
Poor Melia, constantly losing everybody.
Yeah, I know, right?
I just wish there was some level of explanation where Tyrea was. I said it earlier in the discussion, and that is like my last thought here, is like we saw where Nia's people went. And I say it that way. She had Poppy, we saw the picture. But like Melia, we even heard of Tyrea from her, but like we don't see but we don't physically see or get any hints of where any of them are or where they went. And poor Melia, all alone, even more than Nia is. Nia's just bored. Melia is just depressed.
Yep. And maybe DLC. I guess we'll find out.
Maybe. All right. Well, this far in, I think that'll wrap up this rather long spoiler discussion on Xenoblade Chronicles 3. clearly there was a lot to say. And we honestly, we scratched the surface for sure, but we definitely didn't go as far in as we totally could, as evident by our more than hour and a half long discussion here. So thank you, Nintenjix, for joining me to talk about, honestly, this Game of the Year contender.
Yeah.
So why don't you let everyone know where they could find you at?
Yeah, so Source Gaming is obviously the YouTube channel that I run. It's where my Xenoblade Chronicles 3 review is at. So if there was any video I was going to plug, it was going to be that one. So go check that out. But we should also have some interesting Smash Brothers related videos, either out or coming out. I don't know, it depends on when this video comes out. And the same for my theories on Xenoblade Chronicles 3 DLC, which will also be spoiler filled. So if you've listened to this, you're primed and ready to listen to that one. But the best way, I guess, to follow up on news is just to follow me on Twitter, which is at Mr. Nintendo, because you'll get updates on Source Gaming, you'll get updates on my own channel, which talks about more obscure Nintendo stuff like Mac Rider and All Night Suppon and stuff like that. And I also just post art and theories and stuff from there time to time. So check that out, I guess.
Yeah, and we'll definitely include those links down below. And to those of you watching, what do you guys think of this game? I doubt you'll write comments that'll take an hour and a half to read through, but you can give us some detailed thoughts down in the comments, because I would love to read what more of you guys think about Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And other than that, you can go check out Source Gaming with the links below, and stay tuned to GameXplain for plenty more on gaming news, discussions, reviews, and so much more with the myriad of releases coming in the next few months alone. Until next time, though, farewell, everyone.
Bye.